All right, hey everybody, last but not least, repetition. Repetition is pretty self-explanatory. According to our website, usually comes after. It's how you maintain consistency in design, helps users familiarize itself with the way information is presented to them. Bullet lists are a good example of repetition, signaled by, dots. We won't need this. Repetition of elements is what gives identity to design and can be practiced with color, shape, texture, size, etc. One thing that we will talk more about when we get to the slide presentation at the end of the semester is ways in which repetition from one slide to another helps create continuity over the course of this is a slide deck. And so repetition of color, typeface, proximate imagery, etc., helps create continuity across the slideshow. The same can be said for navigating not only individual websites but the internet more broadly. But when we turn to a single two-dimensional image, what does repetition give us? So, for example, in this poster. All right, so not unlike what we've seen in both Nixon and even in Cohen to a lesser extent is the scale and also the specifics of climate crisis, pollution et al. Can be challenging to represent, right? So repetition also works in terms of these sort of like allegorical images, right? So being able to render visually this statistic, right? It's only 23% of plastics is recycled in the United States, as indicated by this metaphor or visual data representation can be useful while also driving home the scale or the excess of plastic production, consumption, waste, etc. in the US. So again, I think that you've seen over the course of these videos that successful design takes audience into account, contributes to ease of reading, and uses visual iconography to or layout or color, etc., to reinforce thematic or rhetorical goals, right? So this poster, I think unlike the other ones we've seen, asks you to read it in portrait, right? So you are welcome to design your poster in either landscape, right, which is left to right along the horizon, or portrait, which is top to bottom, whichever you see fit. Oh, I guess this one is also portrait. So this one is landscape, and then this one's also landscape, right? So we're reading left to right. And while we're reading in a circle, we're also reading left to right in this poster. But finally, what can portrait give us? Maybe that landscape doesn't quite. And I think this poster, while a little messy, does a good job of showing ways in which you can ask your audience to start at the top and read down to the bottom. And so again, this sort of asking the audience to train his or her eye where your poster directs it, and then helping them walk through the content is something that is also an element of successful design. So again, not only are we trained to think about facts about the ocean, which is a kind of claim on the top, but this poster represents and makes visible this is sort of above the ocean, and then as it sort of like descends down, the bottom of the poster is also the bottom of the ocean. So not unlike Nixon, who asks us to make the invisible visible, so too this poster is doing some of that work. So there are lots of successful components to this poster. I would caution you against certain other elements though, right? What, for example, is the effect of having the the center justified texts, for example. So to what extent is proximity and alignment working with the goal of the poster or working against the goal of the poster? So that might be something to consider. Is there too much contrast, right? So how many different typefaces is too many typefaces? I would say 2 is probably your maximum. And then how successful is this in relation, this icon in relation to the rest of the poster, right? So on the one hand, lots of successful things about this poster, especially in terms of repetition, right? So another thing, I mean, we repeat so we remember, right? It's another goal of repetition. But possibly some of the other design principles could have been followed a little bit better. So anyway, it's a good example. Borrow what you want. Let me know if you have any questions. And that is it for Principles of Design. Thanks.